Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Terry Fletcher, which means that this is the WTF What the Football Weekly podcast, and we are in week 5. And what a week it was. I think I say that every week now that we're dealing with our backups and our backup to the backups. When it comes to our quarterback, we have all kinds of things going on where we just can't believe certain things happen on the field, and this week was no different. I don't know about you all, but if I hear the phrase clear and obvious one more time, I think my head's going to explode. I seriously cannot believe that we're down to that phrase when it's like clear and obvious to who? And yes, I'm talking about the PI calls, the pass interference, the ridiculous things on the field that when they challenge or when they go back to take a look because it is a ref's challenge or they call it a challenge from the booth, or when New York gets involved, it's just so subjective. Nobody is making really good calls out there, in my opinion. And it's to the point where, I don't know, I think these guys have too much time on their hands. And I did hear on NFL radio this week that this was a 1-year trial, which most of the rules are. They're installed for a year and then they just kind of keep going. But from what I heard, that this rule is going to be eliminated next year. There's just too many subjective aspects to it, too much controversy. Was it PI? The fact that they can even review if it wasn't called. And then when there is a touchdown or a score, they can basically look at it because all elements now, since it's a reviewable part, can factor into if it was a score. So let's say that you scored and it wasn't called, and they say, oh, we missed that. They can actually factor that in and say, oh, by the way, we didn't call pass interference. So now they take the points off the board. And that's just wrong. But here's another thing. So I'm listening to the NFL radio, and I do that on my way to work each week, or each day, I should say, because sometimes you miss things. I watch not only Red Zone, but also obviously the Steeler game, and I have the NFL ticket and all that. And so I do, and then I rewatch because I have NFL now, and I go back and watch the Game Pass. So I really try to get every detail I can before I get on the podcast, because our fearless leader, Joe, he's very much into detail. We want to make sure we give you good information. And things can definitely get blurred sometimes as you're watching all kinds of different games. But here's something I thought you'd find interesting. I almost think like this is a Jeopardy question. So Ben, our leader, who's on the sideline wearing a headset right now in a cast for surgery on his elbow, he was fined $5,000 for wearing an iWatch on the sideline. Okay, people, WTF, what the football does that have to do with anything? He's on the sideline. He's got a watch on. And by the way, when Odell Beckham Jr., when he basically had his $250,000 watch on the field, he only was told he couldn't wear it because it wasn't part of his uniform. But he didn't get fined. He didn't get flagged. He didn't get anything. So I just don't... It's making me crazy. That's all I'm saying. It's making me absolutely bananas that this is actually happening. And I have a word for these people, and it's stupids. I mean, it's not stupid. It's stupids, plural. And I got that actually from a friend of mine because he's like, they're just stupids. And so that's my new word. And anytime I see that, I'm actually going to hashtag it because I just don't get what they're doing. Was that really necessary? What do you think? Ben is looking on his iWatch trying to call somebody to say, what should we do here? Come on, he just had his watch on. Maybe maybe it was telling him time to breathe or time to walk or whatever iWatches do, but that was just really, 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 really stupid. Then we had a roughing the passer call, and I'm actually going to start with the Steelers this week because the loss has me just still, and I'm just going to say it, pissed. I mean, I'm so angry at this loss because we had so many opportunities to win it. And not only did we fumble our way out of the game, but if you look at a couple of the plays, the refs absolutely took us out of the game. And if there's anybody who has the right to be pissed, it would be Tomlin, because the roughing the passer call and, on one of our players against Lamar Jackson, it's 3rd and 8. He gets his hands around his legs and the thigh area. He slid down a little bit. The guy goes down. Lamar Jackson goes down. It was a great, great textbook play. He even rolled to his left so that he didn't put his body weight on him. And they call a penalty. And I've heard all of the aftermath on this, and everybody said the same thing: textbook sack. This is, I think Dean Blandino said it best on his Fox News after the fact. He said, this is actually what we've asked the players to do. This is textbook. He said it as well. But they give a first down and a 15-yard penalty to the Ravens, and what happens? Justin Tucker, who can kick from the moon and make a field goal, they tie it up. Then we have to go into overtime. Talk about nonsense. I mean, talk about the biggest WTF moment of the game, because that he goes down, and now we're at 4th and forever, and we basically have the game in hand. And our defense played lights out. So I'm having a really tough time with that. And so I'm going to keep going with our game, because there are just so many issues that cause me the WTF moments. And I'm sure you had it too. And I know we do a right after the game, quick yinzer, I think you guys call it, or yinsing session that Joe and Brian do just to vent about the game. But I'm the one that gets the 24 to 48 to 72 hour, break, then go, okay, now it's my turn. And this is what the WTF is. I do go around the league, but I need my moment here just to say, what are we doing? So Jalen Samuels, who's now out because of injury, you remember in the Cincy game, we did the Wildcat 7 times, tried it a couple more times versus Baltimore. I don't like it. It worked fine against Cincinnati because they're terrible right now at 0-5. But it just, at some point, you have to say, okay, enough already. Let's get back to playing football. But we had 6 penalties in the first half, causing us so much yardage. And of course, the holding penalties that the refs are calling now. I think Tom Brady tweeted it out recently where he's like, I can't even watch the games anymore. Just let the guys play football. And so they just kept pushing us back. We had 11 minutes left in the first half, and again, 6 penalties. And I think by the end we had double digits. And so it was just out of control. And I think that the refs are seriously just wanting to pull that flag out. Now I have to get to Juju, and we have to if we're going to give him a hard time, because we know what happened last year in the Saints game, but he definitely, that fumble definitely lost the game, but it wasn't just about what he did. It definitely at the end felt like it, but he had a great play to stiff arm the defensive back Marlon Humphreys and kept his balance for that touchdown in the game. And yes, that overtime fumble punched out by the same player had me crying like you crying, and like, no, you've got to be kidding me. But I knew, and this is my WTF moment, I knew Juju was going to get some social media hate. We need to really lighten up on this player. Think about who he is. He's 22 years old. He's younger than my daughter. And he is out there not only being a leader on the field, but in the Pittsburgh community. He is really trying to talk up guys. And if you saw the interview at his locker after, he was heartbroken. He absolutely took it to heart, took responsibility for it. And I felt bad for him. I felt really upset about not winning the game. Believe me, don't get me wrong. I was like, Juju, you've got to hold on to that ball. But he was a very quick play, catch and run. And it just, that's what they're coached up to do on the Baltimore side. As you could see that on his first play where he did make the touchdown, that same player, Humphreys, he was trying to punch out the ball there. And you're just like, well, he got a touchdown out of that. So apparently he went back for more, and both players, had their moment, which just, it was heartbreaking for sure. Now, here's something you may not have known. And this is from something I heard on Sirius XM NFL radio. And I was just like, that couldn't have happened. But I went and verified it on NFL and went on the Steelers site and then went and did some poking around as well. And I was like, that actually happened. So one of the unfortunate moments in the game, and I couldn't believe it happened, was when Mason Rudolph got hit. It was a very hard hit from Earl Thomas, and I've seen it twice now, and it was really hard to watch. He was flagged, and he will get a hefty fine. He wasn't ejected like Burfict was, because Mason wasn't down on the ground. He was out of the pocket. He was scrambling to make a play. And as a runner, you're kind of now fair game. And it didn't look like Earl Thomas. He had a clear path they call it clear and obvious path, but it didn't seem like he went helmet to helmet for him. It seemed like how he hit him, the result ended up with Mason basically being unconscious for a little bit. He was taken out, hit the ground, and the turf hit the back of his head, which that's the sweet spot for, being unconscious. And it was brutal. Now you notice I didn't say vicious. Vicious shows intent. Was it a brutal hit? Yes. Was it vicious? Again, I've seen it a couple of times. He will get fined for it because we're very reactive in the NFL. But James Harrison weighed in on this on Twitter, and it was interesting because, he's been Defensive Player of the Year before, and he said, I'm a Steeler to the core, which I don't know to the core, maybe to the undersurface, but he would definitely stick up for a Steeler, I believe. And he said, as bad as that looked, it was legal. The quarterback was out of the pocket running around. That's when he was hit. He goes, my heart goes out to him. I also held my breath. He said, but it was a legal hit. So that's why New York did not eject Earl Thomas, because on replay and on the first time they saw it, it didn't look like it was basically clear and obvious intent. Now, Burfict, especially with his history, definitely there. Now, does Earl Thomas have some history? He does, but does he have a history of intent? I don't know. So this is still kind of coming out to see what will happen this week. Expect a hefty fine. I hope Mason is okay, but it definitely was not pretty. And now we've got the Duck, or Bucky Hodges in there, and we have to figure out how he's going to do. So we're on our third string quarterback, which, that Mike Tomlin was clear at his press conference this week. Don't ask me about things that I have no control over, like some rumors that are out there. But basically, I'm on a third string quarterback, and plus I'm pulling up a guy from a practice squad going against a team that has a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback in Phillip Rivers. Leave me alone. I've got more pressing things to worry about right now. Now, many of you were upset, and I on Twitter, again, I'm very active on my Terry in So Caliph. So if you see me on there, I've got the Twitter, my face on there and everything, and it has my Steeler information. But you can see, I can see how upset everybody was when we went into overtime. We actually win the toss, and believe it or not, even with some of the ridiculous calls in the game, I was surprised that we won a couple calls. I was like, wow, we actually got one. That's crazy. But we won the toss, and I was with everybody going, wait, we did what? We deferred. We basically said we'll receive. And you have basically 15 minutes, and how overtime works, as most of you know, but I'll reiterate. The first one to score a touchdown or a safety wins the game. If you only score a field goal, then the other team has a chance to score as well. And then if you tie it up again, then it's whoever scores a touchdown after that. But here's the thing. So everybody was just, they had Mike Tomlin bags packed on his way to Washington. That's my rumor, as their coach, and basically just said, you guys barbecued him and said, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's a terrible coach. But let me explain his reasoning and see if you can follow me on this. And I'm happy to get feedback for those of you that will listen into this and say either Terry doesn't know what she's talking about, or, you know what, on second thought, now that you've all had your 72 hours to really reflect on the game. And believe me, I'm still mad at a lot of things that happened. But here's probably what he was thinking. And this is what his reasoning, I would assume, is why he decided to receive. First of all, there's no chance that he kicks off in overtime if Ben is his quarterback, of course. But given that Tucker, clearly the best kicker ever, can kick kickoffs up in the air like a punt to a goal line, has a range of 65 plus. I've actually seen him kick before in warmups, and we've seen what he can do. He never misses. And Duck, which is our third string quarterback, and the Steelers D had, first of all, we were on our third string quarterback. The Steelers defense had 5 sacks, 3 interceptions in the last 3 quarters. I agreed with the kicking once I thought about it. I was surprised too, but he believed correctly, by the way, that his defense would hold them and we'd only need a field goal to win. Say what you want about Tomlin, but there's a method to his madness. And he's never in his 12 years as our coach since 2007 had a losing season. Not ever. And remember, and lighten up a little bit. I mean, I'm going to say WTF a little bit. Everybody wants to anoint Cowher as the best coach ever. I think he was a decent coach. I think he definitely spoke to his players. It was a different NFL then. He didn't have to deal with all these rule changes and the NFL replays and all of this. And he didn't have to deal with social media either. Remember that. But in his 15-year tenure, he had 3 losing seasons, an 8-8 season, and he didn't win a Super Bowl till his 13th year. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about Tomlin. And the biggest thing when I see people do that hashtag fire him, who else would you get? Seriously. Who else do you want out there? And we are not the Browns. We are not Washington. We are not those teams that decide that they're going to go through a quarterback a new coach every year. We have continuity. We have had 3 coaches in the last, 50, 60 years. We have continuity. And there are teams out there that would scoop up Mike Tomlin in 2 seconds. He's actually one of my favorite coaches. So I really hope that everybody can see what he was doing out there. And your WTF, maybe you pull it in a little bit, or you reverse it and say, okay, everybody else WTF, he knew what he was doing. Maybe not, but maybe you will. So I have a little petty WTF in our game, which had me laughing out loud. I don't know if anybody caught it, but it was really funny to me. So Antonio Brown's cousin, Marquise Brown, he is on the Ravens, as you know, and he made a play, and the announcers mentioned that they interviewed him prior to the game asking him if he rooted for the Steelers when AB was on the team, and he said, no, he only rooted for AB. And Dan Fount said, well, that must run in the family then. That just cracked me up. It just was funny to show that narcissism, selfishness, and basically you're not part of a team. You just root for the player only. It was just kind of funny to me. I don't know. I just caught it and I thought, oh, you know what? WTF, that's really funny to me. So now let's look around the NFL a little bit on some of the moments out there. Thursday Night Football, backtracking, Rams Seahawks. Okay, so the Seahawks won 30-29. What a game. What a game. Russell Wilson, 42 fantasy points. They're already saying that he's in the running now with Patrick Mahomes for the MVP of the league. And it was a crazy game. But I have to shout out my daughter a little bit here. She had him on a bench in fantasy, and he had, again, 42 points. So that was kind of funny to me. But she thinks she's all excited now about playing fantasy football, actually for money, and it's just funny. So Titans kicker Santos missed 4 field goals in their loss, and that was a bummer because they only lost 14-7. So he makes even part of those field goals, they win. So that's a problem. Everyone was missing field goals on Sunday, except of course Justin Tucker. And one of the things, if you recorded that game and you actually go back and watch games we lost, those are hard for me. Did you see the Steeler fans jumping up behind the goalpost when they thought that he missed left and then the wind took it back in slight right? And they sat the duck down. I say duck because, my iPhone, whenever I say a bad word, it switches it to me to duck. Yes. Ducking, duck. Yeah. So that's where we're at with that. But yeah, that was pretty funny just seeing everybody sit down. I mean, not funny, just funny like, oh, shoot. I did think he missed a little bit as well. One of the more amusing things you have to see out there, if you ever get a chance to go look at, there's a meme and a small video. So Jason Garrett, the quarterback of the Cowboys, there was a play where Amari Cooper made a catch and he had to do the toe touch and he got 2 feet in. And of course the refs made a wrong call. They called him out and we knew it was in. I was just like, of course that's in. And he had to throw a challenge flag. Well, he throws his challenge flag right in front of the ref, apparently with also an explicative, which is, a bad word or a saying. Even Jerry Jones after the fact, he said, I hope the little darlings have heard, they may have never heard that phrase or that word before. I was like, really? He made it sound like in Texas they have better profanity. But he threw it down where he spiked the challenge flag and he got flagged. So he spikes the red challenge flag in front of the ref, makes a comment, sounds probably bad, and then he gets a flag for unsportsmanlike conduct. Now remember, if you get an unsportsmanlike conduct as a coach, the second one you get, you're thrown out. So he had to be a little careful with that, and it was definitely some frustration. And then the PI called in the field again in their game as well. Wasn't called on replay. The Cowboys lost 34-24. Now their quarterback, Dak Prescott, was throwing a few picks, so that wasn't good. But what Twitter blew up about more than that game, which I thought was really amusing to me, they showed on the big screen, they showed on TV a couple of times that former President George W. Bush was there in the owner's box behind Jerry Jones, and sitting next to him was Ellen DeGeneres. And, it's been known that they're friends, but people were freaking out. So I just think, you know what, you guys, keep your keep your political posturing aside. I just think it's funny. The best part of watching Jerry Jones, whenever they camera shot to him when a bad play happens, is how many times he uses the F word. And yes, we are all lip readers on TV. And so it was just funny. Every time they had a turnover, he'd say it, and you could clearly see what he was saying. And so that was it was kind of amusing. You're like, oh, I know what he just said there. Now, in an upset this weekend, the Colts actually beat Kansas City, and T.Y. Hilton was called for OPI when it was not. Again, another ridiculous pass interference call that was not there. And they did a lot of call stance. So when they call it on the field, they're not changing it as much as they were at the beginning, which is a real interesting concept there. The Jets are 0-4 after losing to the Eagles 31-6. I wonder how Le'Veon Bell's doing over there. He's getting beat up on his body, which he tried to save for his next big contract, and they're 0-4. So, I feel my blood boiling again as I talk about the Monday Night Football game, because this is where I get crazy. And this is my WTF moments where I just can't seem to let it go. And it's the Browns got a smackdown from San Francisco. I mean, they looked terrible. And I have a really good friend, a client who is a Browns fan, and he texts me. He lives in Ohio, and he's just like, I couldn't even watch it after the third quarter. He goes, it was embarrassing. And they lost 31-3. But think about this. If we had actually, first of all, if the refs did their job in our game, we would be sitting 2-3 and in first place in the AFC at 2-3. We have a very weak division right now. The Bengals are 0-5. We're the best 1-4 team with a losing record. And the Ravens, come on. I mean, they didn't beat us. They won because of bad calls that went their way. Our third string quarterback and in overtime, we fumbled. I mean, they took out our number 2 quarterback, and they had all their starters, and they still had to try to figure out a way to try and beat us. And unfortunately, it was because of our error, not because of their great play. So here's my word again, stupids. I'm just like, I'm still hopeful that we can turn this around. I'm not sure where. I just don't want a losing season at this point. And I just hope that there's some outside chance we can get a wild card spot. But it's going to take a lot of work. When I see everybody going, oh my gosh, the Patriots are so great, I'm like, do you see who they're playing? They're playing Miami. They're playing Washington, and they're killing them. And who did they struggle against? The Bills. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, they won the Jets. They're playing the best teams ever. We would be probably undefeated if we got to play some of the teams they played. So I don't even want to hear about the Patriots. On a funny note, side note, I did win my fantasy this week with my quarterback, Gardner Minshew. Juju did score some points, and the Steelers defense. I also did a bet for the over in the Falcons-Texans game. Did you see that game? Yeah, the Texans won 53-32 over Atlanta. That was crazy. So it was an interesting week of football. It's very frustrating with that, just the PI calls. Every single week we've got something to say on it. It's hard to stay away from it because they're so egregious, they're so subjective, and they're not helping anybody. And it's a problem. Oh, one last thing, we did have a coach fired already this quick into the season. That was Jay Gruden from Washington. That's why I mentioned the rumor about Tomlin possibly going there. And it's just a rumor. I'm pretty sure it's unfounded, but it's out there. So we do have a WTF on some of the things that are out there. But it's just crazy to me because their statement from the Redskins was basically, we are not where we wanted to be this season, and we're now going to be, doing things differently. I'm like, what are you talking about? You thought you had Alex Smith. You had then another backup quarterback. Now you're not playing your first round rookie. Now you're going to the backup, and you have a terrible offensive line. What else did you expect? I mean, I'm not saying he had a great season or to start, but wasn't all that coach's fault. So the owner, and I heard Brady Quinn on Moving the Chains on NFL radio, he was saying something about he thinks that the owner basically just does what he wants to do just so that he can be amused. He has this team just for his amusement. And I just thought that is really crazy. So let's see what Dan Snyder comes up with for a coach coming up soon. So that's it for me this week, folks. Thank you for listening to the Steel City Underground WTF podcast. I'm Terry Fletcher. Have a great week. Until next time.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.